In the early 20th century, Europe looked peaceful on the surface. Cities grew, empires ruled millions, and armies trained constantly. But beneath this calm world, tension slowly grew between powerful nations. Europe was controlled by several powerful empires. The German Empire, the Russian Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the Ottoman Empire all competed for power, land, influence, and military strength. These empires feared each other. Every country believed war might come one day. Because of that fear, they began building huge armies, powerful weapons, and strong military alliances. Two main alliances appeared in Europe. Germany and Austria-Hungary formed one side. France, Russia, and later Britain formed the other. These alliances promised to protect each other during war. At the same time, nationalism grew stronger. Many people wanted their own independent countries. In the Balkans, small nations fought for freedom from powerful empires controlling their lands. Serbia was one of those nations. Many Serbs dreamed of uniting all Serbian people into one country. But Austria-Hungary controlled lands where many Serbs lived. This created deep anger. Serbian nationalists believed Austria-Hungary was an enemy. Some secret groups even began planning actions to weaken the empire and support Serbian independence. One of these groups was called the Black Hand. Members believed violence and assassination could change history and help their nation become powerful and free. One of these groups was called the Black Hand. Members believed violence and assassination could change history and help their nation become powerful and free. In 1914, a visit was planned. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, decided to travel to Sarajevo, a city filled with tension and nationalist anger. Several young assassins waited in Sarajevo that day. They carried pistols, bombs, and dangerous determination. Their goal was simple: kill the Archduke and send a message. The motorcade began moving through the streets. Crowds watched as cars passed slowly. Soldiers stood nearby, but the security was surprisingly weak for such an important visit. One assassin threw a bomb toward the Archduke's car. The bomb bounced off and exploded behind them, injuring soldiers and civilians, but failing to kill the target. The Archduke continued his visit despite the attack. Later that day, his driver made a wrong turn onto a narrow street where another assassin waited. That assassin was Gavrilo Princip. When he saw the car stop near him, he stepped forward, pulled his pistol, and fired two shots that would change history forever. One bullet killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand. The second killed his wife Sophie. Within minutes, both were dying inside the car as shocked crowds watched. News of the assassination spread across Europe quickly. Austria-Hungary was furious. Leaders believed Serbia was responsible for supporting the attackers. Austria-Hungary sent Serbia a harsh ultimatum with many demands. Some were nearly impossible for Serbia to accept without losing independence. Serbia accepted most demands but rejected a few. That was enough. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia in July 1914. Russia supported Serbia and began mobilizing its massive army. Germany, allied with Austria-Hungary, saw this as a threat and prepared for war as well. Russia believed it had a duty to protect Serbia. When Austria-Hungary declared war, Russia ordered a massive military mobilization. Millions of soldiers began preparing for war across the empire. Germany saw Russia's mobilization as a direct threat. German leaders believed they must act quickly before Russian armies became stronger. So Germany declared war on Russia. France was Russia's ally. Germany knew this meant France might soon enter the war. To avoid fighting two enemies later, Germany decided to attack France first. Germany created a military plan called the Schlieffen Plan. It aimed to defeat France quickly before Russia could fully prepare its massive armies. To reach France quickly, German armies invaded Belgium. Belgium was neutral and not part of the war, but its location stood directly between Germany and France. The invasion shocked Europe. Belgium resisted fiercely despite being smaller. The destruction of towns and civilian suffering shocked the world and brought more nations into the conflict. Britain had promised to protect Belgium's neutrality. When Germany invaded Belgium, Britain declared war on Germany. The conflict was no longer local. A world war had begun. Within weeks, millions of soldiers were marching across Europe. Trains carried armies, weapons, and supplies toward the front lines as citizens watched with fear and uncertainty. Many people believed the war would end quickly. Soldiers expected to return home before winter. few understood that this conflict would become one of history's longest and deadliest wars. The first battles were brutal. Modern weapons like machine guns and powerful artillery caused massive casualties. Thousands of soldiers died within hours of combat. Armies soon dug long trenches across the battlefield. These trenches stretched hundreds of kilometers and became the main way soldiers fought and survived. Life in the trenches was miserable. Mud, rats, cold rain, and constant fear surrounded soldiers every day while artillery explosions shook the ground around them. Between the trenches lay a deadly area called no man's land. Soldiers crossing it faced machine guns, artillery fire, and almost certain death. Generals ordered attacks again and again. Thousands charged across open ground hoping to break enemy lines, but most were stopped by deadly defensive weapons. Meanwhile, the war spread beyond Europe. Colonies from Africa, Asia, and other regions were drawn into the conflict as empires used global resources. The Ottoman Empire joined the war on Germany's side. This opened new battlefronts across the Middle East and Eastern regions. Huge battles like the Battle of the Marne stopped Germany's rapid advance toward Paris and turned the war into a long stalemate. New terrifying weapons appeared during the war. Poison gas clouds drifted across battlefields, causing blindness, burning lungs, and slow, painful deaths. Armored vehicles called tanks were introduced to break trench defenses. Though early tanks were slow and unreliable, they changed how wars would be fought forever. Airplanes also appeared in the skies. At first they were used for observation, but soon pilots fought each other in dramatic aerial battles. As the war dragged into another year, soldiers realized victory would not come quickly. The trenches remained deadly prisons where men waited, fought, and survived under constant fear and danger. Massive artillery guns fired day and night. The explosions destroyed forests, villages, and entire landscapes, turning beautiful countryside into fields of mud, smoke, and shattered earth. The Battle of Verdun became one of the longest and most brutal battles of the war. For months, both sides fought fiercely, losing hundreds of thousands of soldiers. Germany hoped to bleed the French army dry at Verdun. Waves of attacks crashed against strong defenses, while artillery thundered endlessly across the battlefield. Meanwhile, another terrible battle began at the Somme. Allied soldiers launched a massive offensive hoping to break the German lines and end the stalemate. On the first day of the Somme battle, tens of thousands of soldiers were killed or wounded. It became one of the bloodiest days in British military history. Despite terrible losses, the war continued. Nations believed victory required sacrifice, and millions more young men were sent to fight in brutal conditions. Back home, civilians also suffered. Factories worked day and night producing weapons, ammunition, uniforms, and supplies needed to support the massive armies. Food shortages began spreading across Europe. Blockades prevented supplies from reaching many countries, causing hunger and hardship for ordinary people. Families waited anxiously for letters from the front. Many feared receiving the terrible message that a father, brother, or son had died in battle. In 1917, the war reached a turning point. Years of suffering caused anger and exhaustion across Europe as soldiers and civilians questioned the endless fighting. In Russia, revolution erupted. People protested hunger, poverty, and war. The Russian government collapsed, and Russia soon left the war completely. Germany hoped Russia leaving the war would bring victory. They moved many soldiers from the Eastern Front to fight in the West. But another powerful nation was about to join the conflict. The United States decided to enter the war in 1917. Germany's submarine attacks on ships and secret political messages angered the United States, pushing the country closer to joining the war. American soldiers began arriving in Europe in huge numbers. Their fresh forces gave new hope to the exhausted Allied armies. In 1918, Germany launched one final massive offensive hoping to defeat the Allies before American forces became too strong. At first, the German attacks pushed the front lines forward, but their armies were exhausted and lacked enough supplies to continue. The Allies soon counterattacked with fresh troops, tanks, and aircraft. Slowly, the German armies began retreating across the battlefield. Germany's situation became desperate. Soldiers were tired, food was scarce, and protests began spreading within the country. Leaders realized the war could not continue much longer. Millions had already died, and entire nations were exhausted by years of destruction. Negotiations for peace slowly began as Germany requested an armistice to stop the fighting. Finally, on November 11, 1918, the guns fell silent. The First World War officially ended after 4 devastating years. But the cost was unimaginable. More than 16 million people had died during the conflict. Entire empires collapsed after the war, including the German Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, and the Russian Empire. New countries appeared on the map as old borders disappeared, and new political tensions emerged. Leaders gathered in Paris to create a peace agreement known as the Treaty of Versailles. The treaty placed heavy punishments on Germany, including territorial losses, military restrictions, and huge financial reparations. Many historians believe these harsh conditions later helped create tensions that would lead to another even larger war. After the war ended, millions of soldiers slowly returned home. Many were injured, exhausted, and changed forever by the horrors they experienced during years of brutal fighting. Entire cities across Europe were destroyed. Houses, factories, and farms were ruined, leaving many families homeless and struggling to rebuild their lives after the devastation. Graveyards filled with endless rows of white crosses appeared across the continent, reminding everyone of the millions of young soldiers who never returned home. The war also changed politics forever. Old empires disappeared, and new countries were created as the map of Europe was redrawn. Many people hoped this terrible conflict would be the last great war. They dreamed the world had learned a painful lesson. But the peace agreement left many nations angry and dissatisfied. New tensions quietly grew across Europe in the years after the war. Germany especially struggled under heavy punishments and economic problems, creating frustration and instability within the country. Slowly, the world began moving toward another conflict. The wounds of the First World War had not truly healed. Historians still study this war today to understand how one assassination triggered a chain reaction between powerful nations. The First World War began with a single moment in Sarajevo, but it changed the entire world forever and shaped the history of the 20th century.